Have you ever wondered why, in so many classrooms, a child's social background can still be one of the biggest clues to how well they'll do in school? Today, we're going to unpack the complex and often invisible forces that create this class ceiling in education.
This is the big question, right? We all want to believe the answer is a simple, straightforward yes. But as we're about to see, the reality is, well, it's a whole lot more complicated than that.
All right, so where do we even start with this? Let's begin with the most obvious factor, money. It just kind of makes sense that not having enough resources would directly affect how a kid learns, doesn't it?
Sociologists point to a whole bunch of really tangible hurdles. If you're hungry, you just can't focus. If your house is crowded and loud, good luck finding a quiet spot to get your homework done. Some kids even have to get a job to help out, which, eats into study time. These aren't just ideas. They are the daily realities that really shape how a child performs.
And if you want to see just how extreme this can get, look at this. This research from India is just staggering. Here, the actual school building is the barrier. When you don't even have the basics, like a working toilet or a blackboard, learning becomes almost impossible.
But here's the thing. Money can't be the only answer. The sociologist J.W.B. Douglas noticed that if poverty was the whole story, we wouldn't see some kids from tough backgrounds do incredibly well. And we also wouldn't see the achievement gap get wider as kids get older. So clearly there's something else going on here.
And that leads us right into our next big piece of the puzzle, cultural factors. This isn't about what kids have in their wallets, but what they bring in their heads, the values, the attitudes, and even the way they talk.
So, one of the key cultural differences that sociologists talk about is this idea of gratification. The theory goes that working-class culture often values immediate gratification, getting out of school and earning a paycheck as soon as you can. Middle-class culture, on the other hand, tends to focus more on deferred gratification, seeing all those years of school as a long-term investment for a better job down the line.
And this isn't just some abstract theory. A study found that 80% of the most well-off moms assumed their kid was going to university. But for the least well-off moms, only 40% even hoped they would. Just think about that for a second. The difference between assuming something will happen and just hoping it might, that's a huge gap.
Now, this cultural divide even gets down to something as basic as the way we talk. This is where the sociologist Bernstein came up with a massive idea. He said that different social classes use language in totally different ways. He argued that school has its own preferred code, a way of speaking that some kids just naturally get, while others have to learn it from square one. Bernstein called them speech codes. Now, the restricted code is kind of like the shorthand we all use with people who get us, our family, our close friends. The meaning is just understood, right? But the elaborated code is different. It's much more explicit, it uses more complex words, and is designed to explain big, abstract ideas to basically anyone. And here's Bernstein's main point. While everyone uses the restricted code, the middle class tends to be much more comfortable and fluent in the elaborated code.
And here's the kicker. Textbooks, exams, the way teachers talk. The entire school system is built on the elaborated code. What that means is, middle-class kids walk into the classroom already speaking the right language. It gives them this massive invisible head start. Meanwhile, working-class kids often have to learn this whole new way of talking before they can even get to the math or history lesson.
Okay, so when you hear all this stuff about cultural differences, it's really tempting to start pointing fingers, right? To maybe start blaming families. And that brings us to a really critical part of this whole conversation. Getting beyond that blame game.
So, does it all just boil down to working-class parents not valuing education as much? This idea, which is sometimes called parental deficiency, has been a really popular explanation, but it's also been heavily challenged.
And sociologists like Hannafin and Lynch push back on that idea hard. Their research shows that a ton of working-class parents care deeply. They're really invested in their kids' education. The problem isn't a lack of interest, it's a lack of power. They often feel like outsiders, like they can't really get involved or make a difference in the school system.
And this idea actually has a name, situational constraint. It's a really powerful concept. It means you can have all the interest in the world. You can care so much about your child's schooling. But if you're working 2 jobs and can't make it to a parent-teacher meeting, or if you just don't feel confident enough to question a teacher, you can't turn that interest into real influence.
Now contrast that with middle-class parents who can often invest in 2 key ways. There's the obvious one, the economic one, paying for extra tutoring, maybe even private school. But just as important is what you could call cultural capital. They just know how the system works. They know how to talk to teachers, how to advocate for their child, and how to make the school work for them.
And we also have to zoom out and look at the bigger economic picture. The sociologist Mockengile pointed out that when all those stable manufacturing jobs started disappearing, it pulled the rug out from under a lot of working-class communities. For generations of boys, the path was clear. Finish school, get a good job at the factory. When those jobs vanished, for many, so did the point of school.
So as we pull all these different threads together, it becomes pretty clear that there's no single easy answer here. The achievement gap isn't just about money, and it's not just about culture. It's this tangled web where all these things, material problems, cultural differences, and the very structure of the school system are all knotted together. Which leaves all of us with a final and pretty massive question to think about. Knowing how deep all these issues go, what would it actually take to build an education system that is truly fair for every single kid, no matter where they're starting from?